Scrum is a process framework within which people can address complex, adaptive problems while productively and creatively delivering products of the highest possible value. Scrum is not a process, a technique, or a definitive method. Instead, it is a framework within which you employ various processes and techniques. The Scrum framework includes Scrum teams and associated roles, events, and artifacts. Each component serves a purpose and is essential to Scrum's use and success. Let's start with the Scrum Rules. There are only 3, and together they make up the Scrum team. The first is the role of product owner, who is responsible for maximizing the value of the product resulting from the work being done. The second role is the development team, which is self-organizing and cross-functional, and do the work of delivering a potentially releasable increment of a done product by the end of the sprint. The last role within Scrum is the Scrum Master, who is responsible for promoting and supporting Scrum by helping everyone within the organization understand Scrum theory, practices, roles, and values. There are 4 Scrum events, all of which happen within a larger Scrum event called a sprint. All Scrum events are time-boxed, that is that they have a set time limit to them. A sprint is generally 2 to 4 weeks long, preferably the shorter period of time. A new sprint starts as soon as a previous sprint ends. There is no time between sprints. The purpose of the time-boxed sprint is for the team to produce a valuable part of the overall product and for it to be potentially releasable. The sprint starts with a sprint planning Scrum event. The purpose of the sprint planning event is to plan the work that will be performed during the sprint. The plan is created by the entire Scrum team. The Scrum Master makes sure the event takes place and everyone understands its purpose. Sprint planning has 2 objectives: determine what can be delivered in the increment resulting from the sprint, known as the sprint goal, and how will the work be accomplished. After sprint planning is completed, the sprint can begin. During the sprint, each day there is a 15-minute time-boxed event for the development team called the Daily Scrum. During the Daily Scrum, the team plans work for the next 24 hours. The Daily Scrum is held at the same time and place each day to reduce complexity. The structure of the meeting is set by the development team and is focused on the progress towards the sprint goal. When the sprint time box has come to an end, the sprint review event is held to inspect the work completed and adapt if necessary. During the sprint review, the Scrum team and any stakeholders discuss the work that was done in the sprint. Based on what has been completed during the sprint, the Scrum team and stakeholders determine the next things that can be done to optimize value. The sprint review is an informal meeting, not a status meeting. The result of the sprint is presented to gather feedback and foster collaboration. The last Scrum event is the Sprint Retrospective, which is a chance for the Scrum team to inspect and adapt the process. The Sprint Retrospective occurs after the sprint review and prior to the next sprint planning event. The purpose of the Sprint Retrospective is to inspect how the last sprint went with regards to people, relationships, and process, along with identifying any major items that went well and potential improvements. Finally, the team creates a plan to implement any improvements in how it works. There are 4 Scrum Artifacts: the Product Backlog, Sprint Backlog, Progress toward the Sprint Goal, and the Increment. The Product Backlog is a list of everything called Product Backlog items that is known to be needed in the product in order by value. It is the single source of any changes that need to be made to the product. The product owner is responsible for the Product Backlog. The Sprint Backlog includes the Product Backlog items that are part of the sprint goal selected during sprint planning and a forecast by the development team about what will be in the next increment and the work that needs to be completed to deliver that increment. Progress towards a sprint goal should be able to be determined at any time based on the work remaining compared to the team's capacity within the sprint. The increment is all of the Product Backlog items completed during the sprint and can be inspected as part of the sprint review. All of these rules, events, and artifacts make up the core of the Scrum process framework.
Check out all of our professional education offerings at professionaled.harrisburgu.edu.